There are a lot of videos online about how to make the most powerful D&D character, how to make the strongest D&D character in combat. And these videos are great, but D&D is a collaborative storytelling game as well. So I want to make a series of videos that are focused on making a character that is as mechanically satisfying as it is narratively satisfying. We gotta ask ourselves a question: how do we tell the best stories? And that's where a narrative character sheet comes in. This video is gonna be two parts, one for the player and one for the dungeon master. We're gonna answer some questions and bring up some themes that can help, and we're gonna do it alphabetically, class by class. So we're gonna start today with Artificer, and obviously we're gonna end with Sorcerer. Artificer is a tough start for the series because it's a later addition to the game from a different setting of Eberron. Their description reads, "Masters of invention, artificers use ingenuity and magic to unlock extraordinary capabilities in objects. They see magic as a complex system waiting to be decoded and then harnessed in their spells and inventions." So when we think of artificers in media, fantasy or not, there are a couple of characters that come to mind that we can take inspiration from. Take Inspector Gadget or the famous Tony Stark, the Iron Man. However, as a player, the first question that you should ask is, are they even here? Are artificers even in this world that the DM has proposed? So do ask your DM that. Is there such a thing as an artificer before making that character? Because the DM can tell you, no, artificers are not a thing here, and you will have to choose a different class, which is okay, because I will have other videos about other classes very soon. But when it comes to artificers, what kind of themes can we expect? What kind of narrative threads can we pull? This is what we're gonna explore today. First, let's delve into our origins. So we're gonna ask ourselves questions: what made your character become the artificer that they are now? Where did they start? Did they start in a family business or some kind of governmental institution through these inventions? And did they start because of accessibility and privilege? Or was their start more due to desperation and necessity? Next, we're gonna move into their playstyle. D&D is a collaborative storytelling game, which means that your mechanical gameplay parts will blend in with the roleplay narrative parts as well. And for artificers, that means their tools. Artificers is the only class in the game that specifically uses artisan tools that they're proficient in to make their magic and spellcasting and whatnot. However, it doesn't say specifically Tinker's tools or anything particular. It can be any set of artisan tools from the game. So this is where big patch of your creativity comes from. You can choose any set of tools and show the gameplay and the playstyle of your artificer in that way. They can be unique. This can be a glass blower artificer. This can be an alchemist with a potions kit. This can be even a chef, a cook with cook's utensils. It can be really anything your heart desires because flavor is free. When it comes to your playstyle, the main question that you should ask is, how do they perform? How does their magic looks like? How do they get access to their main features? That goes into our next step, which is firearms. Firearms are an optional rule from 2014, which says that Artificer could have firearm proficiency. Once again, we gotta, as a player, ask the DM that. Are there firearms in this world? Would my character have access to one? How would it look like? Is there gunpowder? Are they powered by something else? Etc. If you want to wield firearms, you ask your DM that, and if that's possible, go ahead. But do know that it is not necessary for an artificer to have firearms, even though the D&D community and the memes and jokes would tell you otherwise. Next up is the Artificer's subclass. These are the following subclasses: Alchemist, Armorer, Artillerist, Battlesmith, these are 2014, then 2024 added Cartographer. I think subclass is one of the most fundamental aspects of a character. That's really where their personality comes from a lot, because an alchemist and a battlesmith can be completely two different characters with different goals in mind. So if you're starting at level 1, do think through, plan ahead a little bit. What kind of artificer, what kind of flavor do you want them to be? And more importantly, what kind of journey do they have to go through to achieve this third level, to achieve this subclass? Do they need to pass a certain exam, or do they need to have a eureka moment overnight? These are the fun little tidbits that you can craft together with your DM. As I've mentioned before, mechanical and narrative things blend together well, and for artificers, it is shown in one of their main features, which is crafting. Artificers can make new magic items from scratch, replicate other different magic items, and even infuse items and make them magical in nature. That feature is very important to artificers. So narratively, what can we do about it? We can describe how does this process of creating these items look like for the artificer. Do they take joy in creating these items, or is it just out of necessity? And another fun things that you can talk about with your DM is, are there any specific calculations, machinations, and rituals that involve creating these items? Maybe due to some world building and lore, there's some taboos on some specific magic items that can't be made from scratch. I'm looking at you, bag of holding. That goes into our next point, which is your artificer's personality. Personality is one of the main aspects that you're gonna shape throughout the campaign and throughout the journey, not just in your backstory. Some of the personality aspects that we can discuss specifically for an artificer is their relationship with their creations. Do they think of their creations as their extended family, as their children? Do they take joy in taking care of each little infusion and polishing it and just treating it with kindness? Or is it an artificer that's more cold and bitter and just thinks that this is a chore, a business to run? Next up, we have bonds, which is a very important aspect for any character. Your family, your co-workers, your customers, your other party members. Whatever bonds you have really shapes your journey along the way. And this can be friendly bonds. This can be maybe you have a mentor that showed you the artificer ways. Or maybe you have an apprentice, some naive kid who is trying to learn all this invention and technology kind of stuff. That's more on the friendly side. On the neutral side, you could have some very important customers. Maybe you have some customers that kind of pay the money that gets you through life, and one of the goals that you gotta set in mind is you gotta make sure that you have this project done by the end of the month for this very specific, very special customer, and that kind of blends you more into the world with the DM. There's also some hostile bonds. You could have a rival, an opponent artificer that is trying to one-up you and improve and challenge you and your inventions and show that this artificer is better than you, and you can have this heated rivalry that goes throughout your journey. To sum it up, I think that guilds, organizations, bonds, family, and any interpersonal relationships is a certain way to make from a good character to a great one. Lastly, as a player, your final, last but not least theme is your goals, your motivations, your inspirations, your to-do list, really, long-term goals, short-term goals. That is the main thing that you gotta decide when making your character. And for an artificer, what can really drive a person of invention? Probably something really cool, right? Just maybe you want to make something that's awesome and never thought of before. Maybe your character is chasing some kind of a rare ingredient or a rare magical component that is required for this just never thought of before invention, right? This is the biggest thing that usually these people of invention chase. It's just science and information and knowledge, learning something new, making something new from scratch. That is a more neutral goal. It could be something more lawful, it could be something more good aligned. Maybe your artificer wants to give back to their community. Maybe they want to invent something that will make the lives of the common folk that they grew up with easier. Maybe we can move more to the evil goals, and maybe this is an artificer that wants to bring a new age of technology and progress, but they don't understand that the civilization is just not ready for it yet. Whatever drives your artificer, you gotta make sure that it blends seamlessly into the DM's world so that the DM can be prepared for it. If you want to make a nuclear weapon, sure, just you gotta let your DM know ahead of that, not just at level 3, you know? Think of what your character wants, needs, and chases, and it can be materialistic or philosophical, but do know that once you achieve that thing, that doesn't just end the character. It ends one narrative thread and then another one begins. Now, for the dungeon masters, this is the part of the video for the DMs. You now have a player who wants to play an artificer. What do I do? Couple of things to mention first. As I've mentioned prior to the beginning of the video, your world does not need to have artificers. You can say no. If it doesn't fit your setting, if you feel uncomfortable with the amount of mistakes and plot holes it would generate, that's fine. Just say, sorry, no, artificer is not an option. And I am sure that your player will listen to you and just pick something else. Everything is gonna be okay. But if you do want to integrate artificers into your world, the question of whether they exist or not doesn't have to be a simple yes or no. If you want to make it a little more deep, a little more complicated, then you can add some oomph to their origins of artificer as a profession, right? For example, you could go the route of the Dwemer from the Elder Scrolls. These are big inventors and people of technology, but they've been lost to time for thousands of years, and now their inventions are kind of useless because the makers are no longer here. So it could be this time-lost art. Or maybe it could be that artificers exist, but they're so gate-capped, they're so hidden away from society because the society is not ready for them yet. They're only used behind closed doors and very, very gate-capped. It could be a mix of both. It could be neither, depending on geopolitics of your world. That goes into my next topic, which is the approach. How does the world approach artificers as a profession? It's a little similar to world building, but the main point of approach is how does the world view them? For example, are artificers people of nobility, people of royalty, people that are commissioned specifically by people in power? Maybe it comes with the dark side of that. For example, their inventions and creations are under strict surveillance, and this goes into this sort of narrative that the people in power, the government, the kingdom does have artificers, but it watches over them very strictly, maybe even keeps them in jail or something, or very behind doors. So you can play into this narrative thread that you can unveil with your player. Maybe artificers are kind of the mad scientists. Maybe they're the misfits, the outsiders of society, people that have lost their original jobs and now serve as kind of ripper dogs from Cyberpunk, where they do exist and it's not entirely legal, but people still get their services out of desperation and out of last resort. You can build a lot with this profession. That leads into the next subject, which I like to call style. So, artificers, as I mentioned, don't have to be metal workers. They can be really anything you want it to be, as long as it goes within the theme of invention and new creations. So, the main question that I like to ask myself is, what kind of fuel do they use? What kind of resources do artificers use for their creations? Of course, you can go the general high fantasy round and say, oh, it has X amount of magic charges and it recharges at dawn. But if you want to have a little bit of kick to it, a little bit of spice, you can pick a resource. It can be oil, it can be steam, it can be animal fat, diesel, anything you want it to be. And just make it so that's a very central part to the creations. Make it so that it doesn't just go infinite and recharges by itself. You can go into the more eccentric route and say that it uses energy from outer planes. This is your creative output as a DM, is to say, what do you need as an artificer to get well in the world, to ascend to the higher ranks of this profession? Last but certainly not least is the story part, the aspect I like to call story, which is the main general question is, what kind of story do you as a DM and what kind of story does the player want to tell through the eyes and the hands of an artificer? This can be something simple. This can be the story of a man that ascends in society, that goes from rags to riches and goes to the place in society that he deserves. It could be the opposite. It could be a story of a downfall of a man that had everything and then lost everything due to his artificer infusion addiction or anything like that. This can be the story of a man that traded away his humanity for steel. That leads me to my two most important questions that should be asked as a DM and as a player. Number one, the main theme of most artificers that I've DM'd for is loss of humanity. How much are you willing to pay for these inventions, for these creations, for this kickstart in progress? How much humanity of yours are you willing to sacrifice going into these more technological themes, right? So, loss of humanity. And question number two, which I see in the eyes of a lot of artificer players, that question kind of blends in and goes both narratively, like at the table and outside of the table, which is, How far? How far can we push things? How far can we stretch the limits and the compounds on what we're given? How far can we go with what is allowed and what is expected? That was Narrative Character Sheet. Thank you.